wishing everyone tuning in a very happy new year. I hope your 2024 is filled with opportunities to grow and learn, and that this podcast continues to be a part of your weekly listening routine. Whether you are brand new to the podcast or have been a long-time listener, I am grateful you are here today. Welcome to episode 254 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 17th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. I'd like to welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is at LMS_United. On Threads, you can find me at School Librarians United, and on Blue Sky at SLU Podcast, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. With 2023 and the holidays behind us and winter keeping many of us indoors these days, I'd like to invite you to consider an opportunity. I'd love to crowdsource an episode each month based on listeners' voice messages. Much in the same way, longtime listeners to the show will remember the 3 Can I Just Vent episodes, and I've included a link in the show notes, but these were fun collections of school librarians sharing their circumstances and giving us all a very healthy dose of perspective. January's theme is Hills I'll Die On. See the link in today's show notes on instructions for call-in shows for guidance. I love this particular prompt because, as we've all come to discover on whichever social media platform you frequent, we school librarians are extremely opinionated. And thankfully, we are more than willing to share these opinions with anybody who will listen, hence the podcast. If I were to offer my own hill I'll die on as an example, the best and only place a barcode belongs is on the front cover of a library book. And then I would proceed to list all the reasons why I am right in feeling this way, and that any other preference is clearly wrong. Friends, there is a deadline for submissions of January 20th, as I will need some time to assemble and piece together all of these submissions into an episode. I would really, really love it if you could also include a fun headshot of yourself, as I typically share a photo in the days preceding the episode drop. And since this is a call-in show, I won't have those. So if you would send me a fun headshot of yourself, and I can put a little composite together in the week leading up to January 27, which is when this episode will be shared out. So friends, I hope you record a hill and send it along with a fun photo to schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. Be sure to listen to episode 224. I announce a sponsorship with Literati Book Fairs. And now a chance to hear from one of Literati's Book Fair veterans, Amanda. Friends, we are so lucky to have Amanda Chacon back with us on the podcast. Would you give us an idea of where you are in the country and tell us a little bit about the students you work with?
Sure. So I am currently an elementary school librarian at a Title I school in Houston, Texas. We have around 600 students right now in grades 1 through 5.
Outstanding. And you've already hosted 2 Literati Book Fairs. So I'm really curious, when you had those, when you had your parents come in, can you give listeners a little taste of what that evening activity was like in terms of having the families in? What kinds of things did you have going on in conjunction with your book fair that would also bring the families in and hopefully do some shopping while they're there at the school?
Yeah, so we always tie our book fairs into a community event going on at our school. So one of them that we had was a trunk or treat event where kids got to trick or treat around the school and then come to the book fair. And, when they all, with the parents and the students, enter the book fair with Literati, it's an immediate ooh, just like, because it's very elegant looking and it has a bookstore kind of feel to it. And that's exactly what I noticed as they were going around looking at different things. Just like in a bookstore, you kind of browse around here, you browse around there. There's not chaos, which is important. And then there's lots of labels and signs to make it easy to see, this is what I'm looking at, this is where I want to go. So the vibe was actually very calming in a way, which is unique for a book fair, but also engaged because parents were asking their students, hey, what do you think about this book? As students were saying, can you buy this for me, to the parents?
It was very hard standing, at the checkout and feeling like I was the reason why they were having these difficult conversations. But, I like to make sure that when students and families are there, that this is something that they're excited about, and they definitely feel that this is a worthwhile way to indulge their children and support their school at the same time.
Absolutely.
Oh, I love that. Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Friends, be sure to tune in to learn all about Literati and their very generous offer. Librarians who book their very first Literati Book Fair for this school year and mention the code UNITED when booking may qualify to receive a $500 gift card to Titlewave. Visit the link in today's show notes and call the Literati team to see if you qualify. And now a word from our sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning PebbleGo research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I am so excited to be working with them. I'm also grateful to Capstone for their continued commitment to support the podcast in Season 6. They are offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. I do want to make sure to give a shout out to Texas Library Association's podcast, Libraries Transform Texas, and their episode, Tall Texans and What It Can Do for You, which was recorded in April of 2022. I've included a link in today's show notes. Friends, I have met quite a few Tall Texans, school librarians who participated in a program that I'm convinced this type of formalized professional development would benefit library organizations across the United States and around the world. My hope is that in sharing this conversation, listeners in Texas might consider applying, and librarians outside of Texas would find ways to implement similar leadership practices and institutes to support librarians in their own regions. And now for our episode, Librarian Cohort, Tall Texans, and my conversation with Amanda Hunt, Karina Quilantan-Garza, and Morgan Green-Griffin. Friends, I'm so excited. Amanda Hunt, welcome back to the podcast.
Hi.
So happy New Year, Amanda. I'm grateful that you're here today.
I'm so excited to be here too.
Friends, we first met Amanda in episode 225, Caution Content Warnings. For listeners who are meeting you, though, for the very first time, would you introduce yourself and tell us about the library and grades you support?
Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Hunt. I am a middle school 6 through 8 librarian in Central Texas. I have been in the education profession for 19 years, and I'm so excited to be here today to talk about a leadership opportunity that's available in Texas.
Amanda, I am so grateful you volunteered to kick off 2024, sharing all your very recent experience as a 2023 Tall Texan, and you made sure that we've included 2 other librarians from your cohort in today's episode, Morgan Green-Griffin and past guest on the show, Karina Quilantan-Garza, who joined us for episode 191, Bilingual Librarians. This must have been an incredibly meaningful experience for you.
It absolutely was for all of us. We can't wait to talk about it.
So let's first meet Morgan Green-Griffin. Would you please introduce yourself? Tell us about your current role and the community you support.
Yeah, so my name is Morgan Green-Griffin, and
I kind of have an interesting role right now. I switched from working as a teen services librarian in a public library to being a volunteer coordinator for all city-wide volunteer programs. So I am not a school librarian. I work in local government. And so in my current role, I coordinate volunteers and engage them with, being involved in their community and making those strong emotional connections with their community at all different departments in a city. So the library, animal services, the fire department, we have a museum where we recruit volunteers. And so it's a little different from being in a library, but it is, all the core functions are the same as the community engagement you have in a library.
I was wondering, though, as a former librarian, you still have that perspective. You still have that background, that foundation of being a librarian. I have to imagine that so much of that previous experience joined you in the decisions that you make every day.
Definitely. I became interested in being a librarian at a young age, and that was because I was a volunteer at my public library. So if it wasn't for volunteerism, I wouldn't have found my way on that path. And when I was a librarian in title, I often found that we were missing out on opportunities for greater community engagement because we were just focused on engaging the community at the library and not the bigger picture. And so I love the role I'm in with the city of Plano. And it's also really great because my boss, who is not, has never been a librarian, also became a lover of local government and a lover of libraries because she started volunteering at the library as a teen. And so it's like the libraries lead to the community engagement.
Well, and they're all taxpayers. And don't we want to make sure that when we're engaging our community, that they see all the amazing things that our public libraries do? Because at the end of the day, I'm sure, like in Michigan, our local libraries depend on local tax dollars to keep those programs running.
Yeah, it really helps with that public trust and the transparency we need. And then in addition to that, I am part of the leadership committee of a nonprofit in Denton, and we provide community programming, so free community programming. So in addition to the volunteer things, I also do that in my spare time, and I'm also working with teens 13 to 18 in that role. So that's a lot of fun. And I still do readers advisory for all those teens and connect them with all the books. So I have the best of every world when you combine my professional and my personal work.
Well, and I'm excited to learn about this program, the TALL Texans, because it's an opportunity for people who are entrenched in the library to also engage with leaders from around the community and benefit from that shared learning experience. Karina, thank you so much for returning to the show. You and I first connected when we recorded an episode with fellow Texas school librarian Miranda Quintero and Jennifer Gonzalez. Would you introduce yourself and tell us about your library and the grades you support?
Hi, everyone. So I'm a middle school library media specialist in the Rio Grande Valley, Texas, which sits on the Mexico-U.S. border. Mexico is literally like 5 minutes away from me. My campus is actually the smallest campus in my district. We serve about 540 kids. The majority of our kids are predominantly Spanish speaking. So a lot of the instruction that I do has to take place in both languages. But yeah, it's a great place to work. I love it here. And I'm really excited to be on this episode because fun fact, me, Amanda, and Morgan all sat on the Texas Maverick Graphic Novel Reading List Committee, which is why we collaborate so well because of our common interest in graphic novels, manga, everything of the sort. So I'm so excited we got to share this experience together.
Well, and I'm sure I've included a link like this in the show notes before, but the Maverick is a great it's how I do my shopping. It's how I get my book titles when I do have money. One of the places that I found is the state book awards, and especially Texas. You've done an incredibly thorough and expansive job of having those awards and having those lists every year, and you make them available to everybody. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to cheat. And I'm going to use some of those Texas resources to help build out my collection, work smarter, not harder. And I do want to mention, because Karina is 5 minutes from Mexico, I'm 5 minutes from Canada.
Oh, yay.
I am 5 minutes from Windsor, Ontario. And I will tell you, I think the wonderful thing about a podcast platform is it doesn't matter how far we are, that we can bring these ideas together. Ooh, getting emotional this early in the episode. All right. All three of you were part of this latest group of librarians, and as we've learned from Morgan, once a librarian, always a librarian in spirit, to earn the designation of TALL Texan. It's the Texas Accelerated Library Leaders Institute, which is more than 25 years old. Would you share with us what motivated you to apply for this program? And friends, I want you, especially if you are in Texas, it's worth mentioning, this is an opportunity that I would hope at some point is on your personal radar. For those of us like myself in Michigan who don't live in Texas, a lot of the fantastic resources that these amazing leaders are going to share with us today are ones that have been so generously shared in the show notes, which means that whether you live in Texas or you don't, the resources are there and available for us to learn and grow from. So I'm so grateful you are all here. Let's go ahead and start with Karina. Karina, tell us what inspired you to put this on your list of things you wanted to do in 2023.
Okay, so I just want to mention that you have been referring to us as leaders, and I'm not used to that at all. I'm not used to being called a leader. I'm used to being called a librarian. I'm used to being called instructional partner, collaborator. Leader has not been in my vocabulary, and that was the reason why I applied. I felt like my experience as a school librarian has really been limited in scope to just campus-based experiences. And I was really hoping that participation in this Leadership Institute was going to help me better understand library administrative roles, what that entails, how different organizational structures, either within and without the districts, hinder or support the development of effective practice and policy, which is something that we really need to really evaluate, especially right now in Texas, considering all the legislative changes. But I just really wanted to develop my leadership skills, but learn about my leadership qualities. Nobody's really asked me that question, and I felt that this type of seminar would have really given me the opportunity to not just connect with school librarians, but with other librarians from different sectors. One of the great things that I love about TALL Texans is it's not just for school librarians. Academic librarians are selected. Public librarians are selected as well. Special librarians, librarians from all different tracks. And I never have a chance to collaborate with librarians from different areas, especially since Texas is so big. But I just really wanted to participate in a learning opportunity that was going to help me nurture my leadership style, and hoping that it would allow me to reevaluate the different responsibilities that I have and how that can be translated into, creating and helping me hone the development of my leadership responsibilities.
Well, and I think what I'm hearing is, I think all of us at some point or another realize we have potential leadership in us. We have the potential to be leaders. And we also, in many of us, there are opportunities. We just have to be more, intentional about seizing those opportunities. And so I love when a conversation like this takes us and it requires us to think outside of the walls of our space. And we have to think outside of the impact that we can have on not just our community at large, but how we can really affect change. I love that. How about you, Morgan? What was it that really made this something that you wanted to do this year?
So obviously, I've recently transitioned from being a librarian in title to a librarian in spirit. And so one of the things that's been really important to me during that transition is finding ways to, one, leverage that change to be a greater library advocate. Sometimes when we're in the librarian in title role, it's harder to be an advocate for libraries because we may not be able to speak up directly about what's going on in our communities or in our particular libraries. And also, I just wanted more ways to get plugged in with libraries and stay connected with them. I don't know, 10 years down the line what I will be doing, but it will probably be somewhere library adjacent. So making sure, or within a library, so making sure that I continue to build those connections and, have a good network with librarians is really important to me. So that was one of the timing priorities. And also, I kind of hold a different concept of leadership. I mean, not different from a lot of people, but in the library world, I guess kind of different. Because oftentimes I feel with librarians that I hear speak, like Karina saying that she didn't identify with being a leader, from the outside, everything I see her do looks like being a leader. And so I've kind of always held the point of view that we are all leaders all the time, and we are, leading up, we're leading down, we're leading sideways, we're leading people that we don't even know that we're leading. But the important part of that and kind of the responsibility is to improve the way that you're leading. And like you said, Amy, being intentional with that leadership. And so, going into the program, I definitely already felt like I was a leader. Maybe, not the top of the food chain leader, but I am a leader in my own right. And that is something that I think is really important to hone, because if you're not wielding that responsibly, you don't know what kind of impact that's having on everyone else.
Well, and to tag on to what you said about, it really is incumbent on us to be sort of forward thinking about doing this, because on some level, not all schools are accustomed to having a librarian. Not all schools are accustomed to having a certified school librarian, and one who has the possibility of making those kinds of changes. And so some of us have inherited or walked into spaces where very little was expected of us. And that's because there hasn't been somebody in that space before who truly has, maximized or taken every opportunity to be that leader in the school. And I happen to come from that space where there's really nothing expected of me. And so I at this point, I see it as my responsibility to do these things because my school has not yet seen all that positive, influence that a certified school librarian can have on a school community writ large. So how about you, Amanda? Why is it that you decided in 2023 you wanted to be a TALL Texan?
So I guess like Karina, imposter syndrome is real. And it's definitely something that I don't know if it's a school librarian thing. Cause Morgan's she knows what's up with being a leader, but for me, it was never something that was on my radar. Like Karina said, I felt more like a collaborator with teachers, with other librarians. But last school year, I was given the role as a secondary lead librarian for my district. And at the beginning of TALL Texans, we were talking with the mentors, and David Linkis I was telling him, yeah, we love David. I was telling him that I was sort of given this role by default. And that's how I felt. I felt like I didn't earn the role. And he was like, I'm going to stop you right there. And he was like, and really kind of checked me on that. And he was like, what's your experience? You know, how long have you been in the role? Why were you chosen? And so I was going through with him and he was like, that's why you were picked, not by default. So changing my mindset on that was really huge right at the beginning of TALL Texans, because then I had a different approach. I was feeling like I deserve to be there, and I'm going to take everything that I learned here and I'm going to go back with it and be the best secondary lead librarian that I could be for my district and my teachers and my students. So that was my main motivation, but I felt like I needed that mind shift when I was there.
And you're doing amazing, sweetie. I love you.
Love you.
I do love the idea of mindset, and in the sort of podcast, bingo card that we can check off, in terms of all those amazing attributes that we call upon when it comes to being a school librarian and a leader, mindset and having this growth mindset, having this idea that we are always in a position to be able to change and improve. And when you know better, you do better. So I love that. Listeners tuning in have all participated in some sort of professional development at some point in our careers as librarians and educators. What makes TALL Texan, the program itself, different from, say, something that would be considered more typical that was offered through our state organization or, say, attending a conference? So, I'd love to, let's sort of parse this out. Let's first of all talk about the fact that there are requirements for becoming or being eligible to participate in this program.
Yeah, so it's an application process, and it's open in a window, and you do need to be, a librarian with a certain amount of experience, for a certain amount of time. Yes, 5 years experience. And all the requirements and stuff will be linked in Amy's show notes. But it was definitely, if you're on the fence about deciding if that's something that you want to do, just know that you're going to you're going to leave with so much information and knowledge to help you make your next steps in your career, whatever that might be, in whatever setting it might be in. That it is 100% worth it to at least apply and see if you're able to attend. And it happens in November of every year. And we were by Lake Dallas, I believe is where it is. And so I feel like it's definitely worth it for your professional betterment because it is a unique opportunity for Texans that I feel like every state could implement in their library.
I love this idea that we are targeting a group of library professionals who are mid-career. And listeners will know we've done an entire episode on the Emerging Leaders program, the AASL program, which shines a light on the leaders we have who are within the first 5 years of their career. And that's amazing. And that's fantastic. I love that this program, focuses on those of us with a few years under our belt because we have the context, we have experience. The application actually says, quote, if you can count in 3 digits the days until you retire, you are not mid-career. I love that this program is targeting people who are well within this space to be making this kind of change in our careers and affecting that kind of change for, a decade? You're looking at people who are not done. We're not done. And I love that about us because this TALL Texan program wants to target people who are in the part of their career where they don't see the finish line. It's like we still got a lot of time here. So you mentioned that there's an application process. The window closes in May. So listeners tuning in right now, you've got months to think about this. But can we talk about the amount of time it took each of you to put together the application that you ended up submitting. So can I start off with, would you guys just give us an idea when you committed to doing this, time-wise, what was the commitment in terms of getting everything submitted?
I can honestly say this is almost my 10th year of librarianship. So it took me about 4 years just to get the courage to apply. So yeah, good 4 years. But because, like Amanda said, it all stems from imposter syndrome. I didn't see myself as a leader. But in the end, when I finally got the courage, and the courage mainly came from Amanda and other librarians who were also applying. At the time, I didn't know Morgan was applying. So when we found out we all got accepted, we're like, oh my God, yay. But the courage, honestly, the support and encouragement came from other librarians that finally had the I don't know, I guess, the courage to apply. The actual application for me, though, I sat on it for like maybe 2 weeks just because I wanted my responses to the essay questions to be, like you said, intentional. I wanted them to be authentic, and I wanted them to reflect exactly what it is that I hope to get out of the program, not just because I wanted to participate in another PD opportunity. I wanted it to be because I wanted to authentically, genuinely learn something that I could take back and share with other librarians in my district.
So, I had a bit of not imposter. I mean, yes, we all have imposter syndrome with applying just because it's like, oh, well, I've transitioned out of libraries. I don't know if when they look at my application, they will see what I'm trying to communicate as how I am still a leader in these spaces and adjacent spaces. And so, when applying, I didn't tell other people I was applying because it was like, oh, I'm either, going to get in or I'm not going to get in. And it's not, if I hadn't gotten in, I think I would have taken it as not the right time, not the right fit, because, that it is what it is. There's a limited amount of, spaces. But I kind of just put a calendar reminder that said, like, do your application. And then that day I went and read the questions, and then I did other work. And then I came back and I spent like an hour and a half writing responses. And I guess I had the benefit of about a year before, applying for, a different job. And so that puts you in the mindset of having to like tote all your own skills and toot your own horn and all of that. So I think that helped a bit. Yeah.
The thing is then, like, I had to really, and I think Karina and I even bounced off like ideas of like, well, what do you think they're trying to ask here? So definitely using your PLN to kind of help you kind of get your mind around the questions is really important. But one thing I do want to say in relation to your question about how it's different is because, like, in my district, there is no PD for librarians, like absolutely none, unless we create it ourselves, unless we create it ourselves and we give it to each other. So for me, that was a huge motivator for attending is like, yes, I can go to state conferences and I can pick my different, sessions that I can go to. But if they're full or if I can't get to one or there's two at the same time and I miss out, then I'm not getting the full 100%, out of that conference that I could, as opposed to this, which is, almost a week-long, intensive, all-day-long professional development opportunity that is sort of exactly what you need in your career. You can't put, a price or a time or anything on that isn't worth it, because it is something that it is a unique opportunity. And it's something that I think every librarian can benefit from at any point in their career, because we just learned so much and we were able to really take time to reflect as well, because I feel like that's a huge part of goal setting and moving forward is taking the time to sit with it and think about
where you're going and where you've been and all of those kinds of things. So having the time, and the setting was serene. Okay. Lake Dallas is gorgeous. And we just got to go sit on Adirondack chairs and we don't get that time during the school year at all. And so to be able to have that time as a school librarian it was a hard time to be away. Karina and I are not going to lie. The week before Thanksgiving is incredibly busy in a school. So for us to be gone during that time was a really big, that was another part that we were not sure if we could do, but we knew it was worth it, and it absolutely was. So that was just something I wanted to add.
And we had just come back from AASL.
Yes.
So, my teachers were like, you're going to leave again? The kids, no, don't leave us.
Yes, so much guilt.
The guilt was real.
And on the one hand, it sounds like a retreat. On the other hand, it absolutely, when you consider how much of what I do when it comes to professional development is remote, honestly, it really is an investment in ourselves. And if we are at all being pulled in all those myriad of ways that we are when we're trying to learn, remotely at a screen, connecting with our PLN that way, something is not going to get through. I do want to mention to those of us who are outside of Texas and hoping to incorporate aspects of this into our program, the website, which we will include in a link in the show notes, does a thorough explanation, including an FAQ. There's a YouTube video on how to apply. You can see the full application in when you click on the links, and it includes I also wanted to say right now, I listened to one of the podcast episodes on how to apply to TALL Texans. There's actually a podcast episode. I'm like, well, this is how I learn. And I found it incredibly affirming that this is a process that is designed for you to succeed. I don't think there are any sort of gotchas. And I don't feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, you didn't need a letter of recommendation in any of this, and you didn't need to have, because I know that when you apply to other things related to our professional development, you've had to get a letter of recommendation. You've had to get sign off from your administrator or immediate supervisor. This is just something that you're doing for yourself, by yourself. And I love that. Something that to me really strikes as being remarkably different and a benefit to the TALL Texan program is that you are drawing upon librarians and people in the library community who have worked in libraries, but across all areas of librarianship, so that the school librarians in this conversation had an opportunity to work side by side and learn from other people who are also in the library community, like Morgan, and draw upon their experiences to enrich what we take back to our schools.
So, yeah, I would say that one of the most interesting things is that you are around all sorts of librarians, and you're also around folks who have entered the other category. I was still registered as a public librarian, so that's what it said on my thing, but I would consider myself an other. And you also had some folks who had entered administrative roles within school districts. And then you had some of the mentors in the groups were outside of libraries, but doing work adjacent to libraries. And so that was also really interesting. And I think one of the things that's helpful is that, and this is for TLA as a whole, is that they do a lot of work making sure there's commingling between different areas of librarianship, because even though we do different things, we're also always doing the same things, and we have similar challenges, and we have similar situations. I know with school librarians often struggle with the feeling of isolation because they feel like a team of one. And I think oftentimes when I talk to school librarians, they are a little bit surprised of, I worked in a public library. There were 6 other librarians, but I often felt like a team of one myself because I was the only one working with teenagers. And so even in, on a given day, I had 20 other people in the library I was working with,
6 other librarians, and I still often felt like I was just on my own. And some of the ways that I handled that, or I tried to advocate for more support, that really translates well to school librarians. And then, there's also lots of rural public librarians who are teams of one or teams of just a couple. And so that's, having been on the Maverick committee for 3 years, one of the most common things from the school librarians I hear is that feeling of isolation. And I know just from talking with Amanda and Karina that knowing that other librarians felt the same way is really reassuring. It doesn't change the fact that you feel isolated sometimes, but it does let you know that it's not just school librarians. And that's a lot of the issues that we're facing, is that it feels really isolating. But the thing is, librarians at all different levels and roles are experiencing the same things.
I appreciate that we have somebody who is not a school librarian in this conversation, because, when I look at your class, your cohort, when we learned from everybody, I didn't do an actual count, but there was more than 20 in your class. Is that right? There's more than 20 in this year's cohort of TALL Texans. So I wanted to make sure that, you give this idea of scale. And, but I want to make sure we throw it out there, because like a lot of types of professional development, there is a fee involved. And this one is considerable. And I know, because I listened to the episode on how to get funding to participate in the TALL Texan program. But I'm curious, that fee is related to that week-long institute.
Yeah, it was, that was another thing that kind of kept us not applying, but definitely it's a consideration for a lot of people. Luckily, TLA is such a vast organization that I know Karina and I were able to get scholarships through our districts. So TLA is broken up into 10 districts for the state of Texas, and I was able to get some of my funds through District 10, which is where I work. Because Karina and I are so involved in the young adult roundtable through the Maverick graphic novel reading list, and also in the Texas Association of School Librarians. She and I both are involved in that as well. We were able to get funds, and our entire trip was covered. So she and I got the whole thing. We didn't have to spend a dime. But yes, it does very much cover, room and board, all of the meals. And so it was, it is a little bit pricey to have to stay at a place for that amount of time. And also I feel like, to cover our speakers, which honestly, I probably would have paid any amount of money to hear Maureen Sullivan talk for the first few days, because she is phenomenal. And I still think about her now. And like, what would Maureen do? So I think it's definitely worth it. But Morgan, you can talk a little bit about how you got yours paid.
So I'm not as involved at the district level, but I am very involved with the Young Adult Roundtable. And so I had part of it covered through there. And then just because of like a small professional development budget for my department, I wasn't thinking that I was going to have the rest covered through work. But then we found some extra money, so I got another slice of it covered through work. And then I paid a little bit out of pocket, but I kind of had planned to, I knew that there was a chance that I wouldn't have funding for it. So I was like, okay, I think this is going to be worth my money, because I knew it was going for room and board and paying the presenters. So I had planned to pay for it all, and I didn't have to pay for much. So that worked out well. And there's so many scholarships available through, different roundtables. There's no harm in asking, and you should ask for that money and see what can be covered.
Acceptances are announced in June. So you've had, January to the end of the spring to apply to this wonderful opportunity. Can you give us an idea of what is expected of participants from the time you find out about your acceptance into TALL Texans and November when the Institute takes place? Because I know there's something in the middle there, and I was hoping you could sort of fill that gap.
The people that organize the Institute actually invite you to Zoom meetings twice during that time frame. One, to learn more about the program, what it's going to entail, what to expect. And then the second one dealt more with logistics, where we're going to stay, what to expect when you stay. They cover everything from the curriculum to what they hope that we'll get out of the program. So there's some communication involved. There's even a group chat that's created so that we can all connect. Somebody even created a Facebook group for those on that social media, just so that we could all stay connected as well. So yeah, they're definitely informational meetings, but definitely information you want to know, because when you apply, you're not really sure what to expect. You just know that it's going to be all about learning, but you don't know exactly what that's going to entail.
You've gotten into this program. It's very exciting. You find out you're going to be a TALL Texan. You're going to go through this process. But, I know you can't reveal everything that takes place during this very intensive program. But can you give us an idea of how it differed from other types of professional development that you've had previously?
So when we go to state conferences, TLA does a great job at putting on an annual conference, right? And I want this to be put out on the record. It is the best librarians conference. But what happens is all the librarians come together and we end up going to our individual sessions. I go to whatever is school library related. I'm sure academic librarians go to theirs. Public librarians go to theirs as well. But what's different about TALL Texans is that we're all literally forced to gather around, sit together, and really discuss the issues that are plaguing us. And what I loved about this institute, the first thing they said, the first night we all met together as a group, was, this is a safe space. Everything that you do and say here is going to be held in confidentiality. We want to build a network of trust and communication. And the question really was centered around, what do you really want to do? You're a school librarian. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a school librarian forever. You may not always be an academic librarian forever or in public libraries. So what do you really want to do? And then let's figure out ways that you can get there. Does it always have to be within the role that you are currently in? No, right? You're looking at the challenges that you're facing, and everything that we discussed was not problem focused, but solution oriented, which is something I really, really appreciated, because we all had an opportunity to communicate with each other about, this is my issue, because it's always an issue, but what are the solutions that I can bring back to my administrators, to my teachers, to my students, to my parents, about the issues that are plaguing us right now and things that we can do to overcome that and become a community of problem solvers.
Oh, I love that. I mean, you sort of require the focus to be moving forward rather than let's just, hash out the things that really upset us. But that will be an episode for January. It's called Hills I'll Die On. And so if I could just throw in a very shameless promotion, if any of you listening right now would like to be on the show at the end of the month, both January and February, we're doing 2 call-ins. One is called Hills I'll Die On, and the next one is Purchases I Regret. Please send in a voice message to me at my email, schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. So I love that we're always working on solutions. Yes, Morgan.
I was just going to tag on that for the difference between other conferences, or even like if you take like a half day to do a leadership, webinar or whatever, is that there's not really a lot of time to process. Amanda mentioned that like reflection is a huge part of it, and that's great. And then also I know at TLA, the conference. It's awesome. But a lot of the superstars like Karina and Amanda are doing 1 million presentations. So they're trying to fit in their professional development with the time they need to present and with the time they need to get free books, because the free books are very important we give these books away to kids later. The free books are very important to me too, because I collect them all and then I try to read them and then I try to connect them with the right kids. And so that is an important part of TLA. And then there's also sometimes like 5 different sessions at a time. So I know something that I struggle with is just like decision fatigue. And, sometimes I get into a session and I'm like, this is not exactly what I thought it was. It's not the right one for me. And then I think, okay, should I walk across a giant convention center and get 15 minutes of a different presentation? Should I just stay put and be maybe a little bit disengaged? Or should I leave and go get more books? And so sometimes there's just too many options to do things. And so I think the removal of some of the options is a great way to allow for better focus on the content. There's no option to listen to Marine or go just get books. There are no books. You're not getting any free books, sorry. So that is a huge difference.
You do get book recommendations, though, which we linked in our notes.
Yes, free book recommendations.
And I'm very aware right now, tuning in, there are a lot of librarians who are on their state committees. And they are chair people, they are assistant chairs, they are president-elects, they are the past presidents, but they still have to run this committee. I know whenever we look at our state organization and the state conferences, you've got a core group of people who never actually get to attend any of it because they are too busy. As you said, they're either presenting or they are coordinating the entire conference. And I've talked to people who have survived that, and they sort of talk about it as, this time where they absolutely were being pulled in 15 different directions. But what they weren't doing was they weren't able to attend any of the sessions. They weren't able to really just enjoy the fact that all of this was happening as sort of around them. So no, I love this because selfishly you are required to absolutely immerse yourself in this experience of focusing on yourself and not on collecting the books or presenting, which is what all too often happens. Yes, Amanda.
So I just wanted to say, in addition to how great it was for us all to be together, a word that we're using a lot in Texas right now with TLA is ecosystem. And for us to have a strong ecosystem, we have got to work together. And so in school libraries, we can be very school library focused, and that's all we know, and that's all we think about. But I am very lucky to have the public library that's in my town, the branch manager. She is the president of TLA right now. And we had some book banning issues that happened. And she and I were able to work collaboratively. And I was able to go support her at the public library level. And she's always now telling me that she can support me at the school level. So that's not a connection that we would have had. And Gretchen Pruitt is actually one of our mentors at the TALL Texans Institute. So she was there to talk and support us. And so that's not always a side that we get to see, that they're going through that same stuff too, And so it was really great to have that perspective and that point of view. And now I have someone else to call on when that situation potentially could arise again.
Ways do you expect your participation in the TALL Texans program is going to impact your career moving forward? And let's go ahead and you can each take a stab at that.
So I feel more confident, I think was a big part of it. Confidence. I left feeling like I belonged at that institute, that I was,
I said I went in with imposter syndrome, and honestly, I felt like I got so many tools in my tool chest to like take back and use, particularly when it comes to like mediation between other librarians or mediation between administration and librarians, and advocating for our role, because like we've said, a lot of us feel like singletons on our campus. We're the only ones. And so they don't see all those issues. So for me, it's putting the library in the spotlight anytime I'm in a conversation and making sure that people know what we're going through and the issues that we're struggling with, whether it's on my campus or it's on one of my other secondary librarians' campuses, and to make sure that we are truly, truly advocating for the profession. I feel like now more than ever, because there is a lot of negativity surrounding librarians as a whole. And I'm a little worried with election coming up, that's going to be another issue that we have to constantly be advocating for ourselves in the profession and books in general. So for me, I feel like confidence was a huge, huge deal that I took away from the conference.
All right. We're talking about how this really is going to affect you moving forward. Yes, Karina.
So leadership goals and my plans for the future change constantly, because there's just so many things that I want to do, so many people that I want to collaborate with. But what I liked about TALL Texans, just like Morgan had said, that there's that time for reflection, and they give you that time to reflect on what you hope to achieve in the future based on what you learned during the workshop. So one of the things that was told to us when we were separated into groups, at least my group, I don't know if it was said in other groups, but our mentor said, just so you know, be prepared to change careers when you're done, because all of the things that you learn, you're going to end up, with a light bulb turned on. You're going to be looking at your role and your abilities from a different perspective, and you may not necessarily align with values, right, that your institutions may have in place. So the questions that are usually stemmed from the reflection are evaluating our strengths, thinking about what we do well, what do we hope to achieve, how do I perform as a leader, how do I approach my work, how do I work well with others, do I even work well with them at all, what are my values now, what are my core values, what are the conflicts, right, between those personal values and then how I operate at work, and do I even feel like I belong anymore, right, because a lot of the strain and issues that stem from conflicts in your workspace and constantly questioning if that's a place for you anymore. Is there something that you would rather do? Where do you want to contribute? Again, what do you want to do? And then let's figure out solutions to get there and ideas on how to get there, and just how we can improve our relationship, not just with others and the people that we work with and how to empower other people, but how to empower ourselves.
I'm just going to say right now, it's a really good idea that you didn't go home at the end of each of these days, because it sounds like you really needed to digest some of this and do some self-reflection in a place that you're not being interrupted by the demands of your family and your job, because this really is an introspection in what you want to do as your time moving forward. How about you, Morgan? How do you see this impacting you?
So one of the ways that I wasn't really expecting was that I started thinking a little bit more about pursuing a PhD. Not super seriously, not anytime soon, but one of the mentors there, David Linkeys, during his introduction, he talked about how if anyone in the room was considering getting a PhD, to reconsider, and that he would talk people out of it if need be. And I thought this was hysterical. I loved it. And then at the end of the program, he talked to me one-on-one and said, I know I said I would persuade people from getting a PhD, but I think that this is something that would be a good fit for you, and that your voice is one that's really needed at that level. And that's not really something that I was expecting to hear. And then I was like, well, I joked that I had thought about getting a PhD so I can avoid paying on my student loans for my master's degree. But apparently, and I learned there are several information library science programs that do fully funded PhDs, which is not something that I knew about. So they cover everything, and then you're kind of working as a research assistant, but they even do like living stipends. And so that's something that I didn't really realize was an option in the PhD field, and something that I've looked into. And who knows? But that's a bigger picture career thing. Smaller picture is that, I tend to be someone who shares my thoughts and my feedback when asked. I try I don't put a lot of it out there proactively, just because that takes like a lot of energy. And one thing that I've been thinking about is just how could I put more of my ideas and insight out there proactively while finding a way to still protect my energy and my well-being and all of that. And I haven't figured out exactly what that is, but knowing that, feeling that the things that I say will be valuable to a bigger audience, not just one-on-one when my input is requested, I think has given me a lot of things to think about.
Friends, I think that I love the timeliness of this conversation, because this being January, it is a month where all too often we are being asked to come up with that one word that we're going to use to motivate us this year. We are sometimes, some of us document our aspirations. We make these goals. Oftentimes we write them down in a journal and we sort of wrestle with them a little bit. But I think that January is a great time to think about how we are going to make some changes to sometimes big, sometimes small. And so I find that this conversation about how we can hone that leader in all of us is really an important conversation. The three of you, you're speaking right now to a global audience. If you could right now give advice to the leadership teams, the library leadership teams in other states and in other countries, what would you suggest be a vital component to the TALL Texan program that you just experienced, and have that replicated in their own states, in their own countries, because that was something that really made a difference? And I realize you might overlap in these, but I'm really curious to know, what is that takeaway that what's that must add ingredient to all leadership programs for them to be impactful to the people who are participating?
I believe that we are stronger together. So I know that there are some state organizations that keep school librarians separate from public or academic or special. I feel like it's really, really important. And I know that some states are even working, like I think New Jersey and New Hampshire are starting to merge the two together. And I feel like that was such a huge component to this being so successful and having been so successful for the last 25 years, is for us to know that no matter what type of librarian you are, that we can all benefit from each other's knowledge. And so I feel like that is huge when thinking about a leadership summit like this, is to make sure that all voices are represented. And also, Texas is really big. So bringing people from all different parts of the state. So like Morgan's from North Texas, I'm Central Texas, Karina's South Texas. So for us to all have a different perspective in that regard as well. We all have different populations. We have different community members. We have different needs. So it's about perspective. I feel like it's huge, and making sure that one voice isn't louder than all the others in the room. It was really important and helped us grow, I think.
I love that.
I'll just chime in that I think a huge part of it is looking past the term of what we think leadership is. Lots of people put a very formal, rigid structure around that word. And so sometimes with other, leadership programs out there, they're really defining it by formal leadership roles. And honestly, almost every leader I've known in a formal leadership role has needed a lot of leading up, managing up to be successful. And so I think looking beyond that formal idea and making sure that, especially if you do have like an application-based leadership program, that when you're assessing those applications, you're kind of trying to read between the lines of, is this person having imposter syndrome about this time they were a leader and they're hesitant about calling themselves a leader, but what you can see in the actual tasks they listed are these really strong leadership skills. And also just, changing the way that organizations talk about leadership, I think is really important. So even if you're a smaller professional organization and you're like, what's one small thing we can do this year, is maybe talk more about how managing and supervising is very different from being a leader.
Awesome. How about you, Karina?
Well, if another organization wanted to take something like this on, because I know like Amanda had just mentioned, I know other associations are separate from each other, right? There's only like school library associations. They're not necessarily under the state divisions. I would say one of the most important things to consider when doing an institute like this is be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Get ready to recognize those unexamined assumptions. Really start thinking about those ingrained habits of thought that lead to certain perceptions that you have that may be affecting the perceptions that other people have about our roles. Because there are studies out there right now that mention that there's anywhere from 3 to 5 out of 10 districts that have no librarians. So really beginning to understand our roles and how we can demonstrate the capacity in which we can work and lead, ultimately how we can lead, and being able to communicate that with other stakeholders so that we can ensure the viability of our profession.
Friends, I'm so grateful to all three of you. We've come together right before the new year. And, I know this is a really busy time. And thank you so much for taking this opportunity to speak to our listening community about your experience and the hope that many of us can benefit from the things that you have shared with us in the show notes. Let's go around. Friends, you can always find our show notes are going to be very comprehensive. But let's go ahead with some social media. Amanda, how can we find you out there in the socials?
I'm super easy. I am the Next Gen Librarian on all platforms, so find me there.
Outstanding. How about you, Morgan?
You can find me at _morgue Ann. So that's, you spell it morgue, like the place where dead people are, and then ANN. So _morgue Ann.
I love that. All right. How about you, Karina? How can we find you?
I'm at Q the Librarian, spelled CUE the Librarian, on all platforms as well.
Friends, I wish you a very happy 2024. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
Yay, we did it.
If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider sending some fan mail to any of our 3 guests who shared their time with us today. One last friendly reminder, use the code UNITED to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more, and listeners who book their very first Literati Book Fair for this upcoming school year and mention the code UNITED when booking may qualify to receive a $500 gift card to Titlewave. Visit the link in today's show notes and call the Literati team to see if you qualify. As I am recording in the last days of December 2023, I haven't quite finalized our January lineup, but I can promise you it will be full of conversations with school librarians sharing what we do in our libraries to support our schools every day. I hope you will tune in.